By the way, I actually know Street Fighter, so
Really?
Some say
You shouldn't have said
doubting.
that. I'm gonna
I
test
used
you now.
to
What is Hadouken?
You don't know what a Hadouken is?
He doesn't know what a Hadouken is, and if you don't know what a Hadouken is either, then you have a problem. You have a problem.
It's funny you say that. I've got a bit of a test for you. Because
Oh man,
I noticed how you made fun of Professor Jonathan Brown. And I'm not gonna, I've got to be fair and stuff.
are we live already?
Yeah.
Is this being recorded?
It's being recorded, yes.
Wait.
So let's start off with something easy.
Okay.
Sonic Boom!
Who's that by?
Sonic Boom is Guile.
Guile, very good. American? Yeah.
Good old American patriot. Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah, I remember that.
USA!
Best impersonation, French impersonation of American patriot.
Alright, how about this? Let's get a bit harder.
Yoga Flame!
Oh man, that's the guy from Thailand. Saget?
That's actually wrong.
No? Oh, all right, let me hear it.
How about this?
Finish him!
Sub-Zero, Mortal Kombat.
That is Mortal Kombat, yeah. It was a bit of a trick question.
All right, but what was played in my mind was
Yeah.
Sub-Zero saying finish him. So
What about...
Get over here!
that's
That's
what's
the...
his name? Ta'al. Ta'al ya
Okay.
walad.
I'll give you that one.
That would be is that just Mortal Kombat in general as well?
No,
right?
that's
When
the guy, the Ta'al guy.
Scorpion or
Yes,
Mortal
Scorpion,
Kombat.
Scorpion.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Yeah, very good, mashallah.
Unscripted love.
Assalamu alaikum. So we have today, mashallah, two Omar Suleimans. We have the Sheikh, the Pir, the Molana, the usual Omar Suleiman, who's on our co-host on the podcast, and we have the Dr Omar Suleiman now. So assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I think that was for me.
You're the Pir Sahib, and you're the Dr Omar Suleiman.
I'm a lowly doctor.
No, mashallah, mashallah. Sheikh, honestly, I have to say before we kick off that you have been the cause for a lot of disappointment. Like people.
He's getting flashbacks of his parents telling him off.
Especially in Malaysia. I've been in Malaysia a few times. I do some work in Islamic finance, and people say, Omar Suleiman, they become quite excited. And then when they meet me, the excitement very quickly dissipates because I think they're expecting you.
They say never meet your heroes, right?
A lot of Omar Suleiman. All right, so there's the Omar Suleiman from Egypt, former
Yeah.
vice president and torturer in chief. What I tell people is don't so every time I'd meet an Egyptian, it would be an awkward pause in the beginning. And I'm like, no, do shabah with Sheikh Omar Suleiman al-Ashqar, rahimahullah ta'ala, who was my teacher.
mashallah.
And I used to say, you know what, compare me to Sheikh Omar Suleiman al-Ashqar, not to that Omar Suleiman. And there are a lot of other Omar
Sheikh Omar al-Ashqar?
Yeah,
Is his middle name Suleiman?
al-Ashqar, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know
He's
that.
from Nablus, which is where my mother, Allah yarhamha, is from.
Mashallah. Rahimahullah.
He write a book. What was a really good text?
Belief in Allah
No, the World of
series.
Angels was Sheikh Abdul Hamid
He had
Kish.
the Islamic Creed series.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's right.
he had the series, and then he had some other books, Tarikh al-Fiqh al-Islami and others. Yeah.
Inshallah. And the Angel series was Sheikh Abdul Hamid Kishk. If I'm correct, was he another well-known Egyptian? Allah. He wrote a really good book on the angels. Did you use any of that for your series?
Not Sheikh Kishk's work in particular, rahimahullah. Sheikh Kishk is though like a personal hero, subhanallah. So he, I've spoken about him in the past on how Allah Azza wa Jal blessed him to die in his sujood.
Wow.
On Jum'ah, he used to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahumma ahini imama wa amitni imama wa ahshurni bayna yadayk wa ana sajidun laka ya rabbil alameen. So he'd ask Allah to let him live as an imam, die as an imam, and to be resurrected in a place of sajda. And Allah blessed him with that on a Friday, on Jum'ah,
Wow.
as he was praying, and he died in his sujood. It was December, I forget, 1992 or 3 maybe, I forgot which year it was, but subhanAllah, he's just an incredible human being, and someone that this was a man that would give khutbahs about the price of meat right? This was when you talk about the merging of deen and the concept of adala and society, when Sheikh Kishk rahimahullah obviously spoke about the injustices that he was witnessing in Egypt in the time, but it was very powerful and beautiful to witness the passion with which he spoke about what the common Egyptian man dealing with rahimahullah ta'ala. So I didn't use his angels, his work on angels, but obviously I have a great deal of admiration for him rahimahullah. And may Allah give us an ending like his.
Ameen. I was speaking to Sheikh Omar, Dr. Sheikh Omar. I need a way to differentiate.
Just call me Omar, bro.
People are like really, tripping over. Just it's fine. Anything from first name to doctor to sheikh to brother is all good.
Yeah, just to differentiate both of you.
Just differentiate me from the other.
So he's Pir Omar Suleiman, and you're Sheikh Suleiman.
That's
Sheikh
right.
Omar. Yeah.
We'll go with that.
I was speaking to Sheikh Omar just an hour ago, quickly just to let him know about the format and stuff. And Pir Omar, guess what his PhD is in? I was like, congratulations getting PhD. But this is a really nice, light-hearted podcast. Nothing. Don't be afraid. It's nothing too heavy. It's not. I was like, by the way, what's your PhD? And he was like, in jihad. I was like, it's getting hot in here. But I do want to touch on that. I mean, it's very, very interesting subject. But what you said about Sheikh, was it Kishki?
Sheikh Kishk.
Sheikh Kishki, rahimahullah. That kind of ties into your own activism, kind of Islamic activism. You built up somewhat of a brand over the years. I mean, Sheikh Haytham actually, I think a few years ago when he met you, he was talking to us. He said he was at some gathering and he said this Sheikh Omar Suleiman, there's something about him. He had a message, right? He was saying that there was a lot of people, speaking, and sometimes everyone you just speak for the sake of saying a few words. But he was saying, Omar Suleiman, he's someone who has a message. Yeah, and he was impressed with you, mashallah, tabarakallah, not to praise you to your face, but I want to ask you, what is that message? Yeah. What is your message? What is your kind of your vision for your own personal dawah?
This was supposed to be lighthearted. So first of all, Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Haytham, that's husn al-wan.
Depends what your vision is, isn't it? It could be lighthearted, Sheikh. I think that, obviously, I think that a lot of people have come to know elements of, things that I'm involved in different capacities, right? So when I was, Imam in New Orleans, Louisiana for 6 years, I worked in Hurricane Katrina relief. I worked in interfaith work. And then, of course, primarily as the Imam of the masjid and doing those types of things, right? And then, now some people might merely just interact with sort of the da'wah in terms of the angel series or things of that sort. And others maybe exclusively some people through the element of activism. I'm not sure if I would summarize it all in one thing, but I would just say that particularly in that scope, I think that I'm certainly not alone in this. So I don't want to present myself, as being unique in this regard. There are people, mashallah, like Imam Zayd Shakir, who has walked this path for many years, who's a forerunner. Imam Siraj cleaned up, entire sections of a city, who's a forerunner, who's a sabiq in this. There are people like Sheikh Dawood Wareed, still who's just someone that I love dearly and benefit from. There are people like Dr. Rami Nashashibi in Chicago. Not many people know him, his work with Imam and the work that he does. So there are a lot of examples that are out there that are, I think trying to figure out a way to revive with Islam, to show people that Islam in its most orthodox sense is of benefit to society, and to sort of merge the fields of da'wah and khidmah. To us, it's not, there's no dichotomy, right? It's public work, and public work involves the element of calling people to Allah and then serving people for Allah. And serving people for Allah has two elements: the justice element and the charity element, right? So, and those things are all interconnected. So,
I pray that Allah Azza wa Jal grants us tawfiq in showing and being a part of, bringing Islam to the people in a way that it is a benefit to them, to their hearts and to their lives, and not departing from the Sunnah in any way in the process of doing that, but instead reviving elements of the Sunnah that are often not seen in the public space. So that's something that I hope to follow in the example of those wonderful people, mashayikh and just people that do incredible work. I pray that Allah Azza wa Jalla allow me to follow in that example, and all of us to be following the example of the Prophet ﷺ in that regard.
Yes, subhanAllah. I mean, the first thing the Prophet ﷺ said when he came to Medina as a de facto leader is a statement full of wisdom. Afshu salam wa at'imu ta'am wa sallu al-arham wal sallu bil nasi wan nasu niyam. Sallu bil layli wan nasu niyam. Yeah. Afshu salam, spread peace and security, feed each other, feed food. Me and Omar and I like that one in particular. Wasalul arham.
Feed other people, by the way.
Each other, inshallah. Join the ties of the womb, and pray at night while people are asleep. So, I mean, not to go kind of airy-fairy about it. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff. Islam is comprehensive, but just when you're the actual leader, the de facto leader, like the prime minister, president of a society now, the words that you choose to give in that public address, that's powerful.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to recognize that most of the time the strongest words are the ones that are not spoken. And that's what Umar radiallahu anhu said, "Kunu du'atan illa wa antum slamitun." Be callers to Allah without saying a word. And they said, how? He said, with husn al-khuluq, with good character. And so I think that if we genuinely were to revive the aspects of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that are of benefit to the people, then that naturally, bidnillahi ta'ala, will attract the hearts to the call of the Prophet ﷺ. And when he stood on a Safa and he called the people, he referenced his goodwill to the people for all of that time. That if I were to tell you there was a harm that was coming your way from behind that mountain, would you believe me, right? So he referenced the credibility that he had, alayhi salatu wassalam. And I think that a good way for all of us to measure ourselves against the stick of the Sunnah, and the Sunnah is comprehensive in that it covers every element of our lives, every element of our family lives, our individual lives, prayer habits, public service, all of it is covered by the Sunnah, and all of it is relevant. Like we can't say this part, we shouldn't be talking about this. We should know all of the Sunnah is worth talking about. All of the Sunnah is worth challenging ourselves with. Its restrictions, and also what it gives life to, what it revives. And a good way to really measure ourselves is, what did Allah praise the Prophet ﷺ for in the Quran? Because when we think Sunnah, oftentimes we think only about certain elements of the Sunnah. And all of those elements are important. But what did Allah praise the Prophet ﷺ for? And what did the Prophet ﷺ reference when he called the people to Allah in Mecca initially? And I think we should always be challenging ourselves with the Sunnah in our family lives, in our community lives, in our individual lives. And we will always be falling short, which is the beauty of it, because that means there's always something to strive for.
Yeah, I mean, our sheikh, a lot of our sheikhs, they always say that you have to try and push for a holistic tarbiyah, not just, because what we tend to do is become experts in one tiny field, and then we completely, neglect so many aspects. So that the kind of the caricature is a talib ilm who's does lots of study and stuff, but he almost prides himself in not knowing anything about politics. And the other side, and it's a caricature obviously, but the other side is someone who's completely immersed in activism, but they've strayed so far away from their own tradition that they kind of end up walking into murky territory. And it's a crisis of tarbiyah. Some people say that we need to try and excel in all these types of everything from the Sunnah. I mean, Sheikh said one thing really maybe controversial. He said, if you people who study Aqeedah a lot, right, like go into the detailed books of Aqeedah and so forth, like disproportionately, they'll be very bad at politics. Right? Like if you, Sheikh Haytham, always said this to us. I mean, and years ago, I didn't really appreciate it until I maybe started seeing more and more people in different types of backgrounds and stuff, that the way they attack people in the political realm is a very kind of so Aqidah breeds studying Aqidah as the science. It really breeds a very particular type of mindset, right? Because you're dealing with literally haqq and batil, iman and kufr.
I don't want to push back, but I do actually think it's healthy. It's healthy that some people specialize only in certain areas. I don't think that everyone has to be the same way.
Yeah, I was going to say this. Is it even possible now for someone to be a generalist in that sense? Because the needs of the community, both our own and wider, is such that we need specialists in certain areas, but it's how they work together with each other where the challenge is. I don't think it's possible now. Maybe Sheikh Omar Suleiman will tell us differently, but to know everything, the complexity of our communities, and recently we've seen even more so, how are you able to actually deal with it and be a specialist in everything? You can't be, but you need to have access to people who are.
Yeah, I think the key is not undermining each other, right? So
Yeah.
I have mashayikh that would never go into a protest, for example, or they kind of they're in the realm of tafsir or in the realm of hadith, and that's what they teach and that's what they do. But at the same time, I would seek nasiha from them in general, and I appreciate their specialty and they're sticking to what they're doing, and it's okay. I think the point is not to undermine one another, right? So I think that's how there's the individual becoming more holistic, which we should always try to keep ourselves balanced by properly, gaining a sufficient knowledge base, even in the areas that we don't necessarily direct our efforts towards, but having enough of a knowledge base to understand the realities of a situation so that we can give holistic advice. So I think on the individual level, there's the spiritual, the balance of personal ibadah. قيام الليل كانوا قليلا من الليل ما يهجعون وبالأسحار هم يستغفرون وفي أموالهم حق للسائل والمحروم. The idea of praying at night and then serving during the day, and what that looks like for the person, but the division of personal ibadah and public ibadah, and then the individual, having a specialty, but then a sufficient knowledge base in different areas, and then directing their efforts in certain areas, which I think is healthy, and then supporting one another. تعاونوا على البر والتقوى. We don't want, I don't think that the Sahaba had this expectation of one another, right? That you have to be exactly like I am. I think the great tarbiyah of the Prophet ﷺ is that he made not Umar radiallahu anhu into an Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu or vice versa, but he made Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu the best possible version of Abu Bakr that he could be. And he made Umar the best possible version of Umar that he could be.
Yeah.
And the ummah needs the rifq of Uthman radiallahu anhu, the hikmah of Ali radiallahu anhu. It needs the quwwah, the strength of Umar radiallahu anhu. And it needs Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu in every way, right? But like the ummah needs that specializing. And it's important for us to sort of say, okay, I'm not doing all of that, but I'm not going to diminish that person's value to the ummah right now. Like if someone is analyzing ideological trends and writing about ideological, like I can value that. If someone is focusing on the classical sciences and teaching that, and not diminishing, not belittling people that are maybe doing other elements or working in other spaces, but sticking to their specialty. Like I can admire that and appreciate that. But what needs to happen, inshallah ta'ala, is more of us working together, helping each other understand what we're doing, and then working as one ummah, inshallah ta'ala, for the betterment of everyone around us.
Assalamu alaikum, guys. Sorry to butt in, but if you're enjoying this podcast, please head over to islam20c.com/donate to help us make more. And if you're not enjoying it, head over anyway and help us make better ones. How do you think we can get to that level though? Because I mean, maybe I'm just kind of disproportionately exposed to people, the haters, basically, because often what happens is people belittle the other person because their interest is in this area and that person doing something else. And as you mentioned, we need that variety. I mean, we need people who organizations and stuff that rub shoulders with politicians, that shake hands with, evil people for the sake of, a particular very specific goal. And we need people who, talk about the theory and elucidate what is truly haqq and batil and so forth. But it's poisonous when they're kind of refuting each other and when they're undermining each other, and we're saying no, you have to do things this way, rather than acknowledging that the ummah needs different types of organizations and stuff. How do you personally, go about trying to inculcate that I want to say pluralism, but that kind of differing on your focus, but ultimately understanding that is better for us as a whole, as a community?
So ikhtilaf is actually healthy, right? Difference is healthy. It's how do we learn to both privately and publicly disagree without cutting people off, or really utilizing the tools of our enemies against ourselves, right? If you when we start utilizing the tools of the enemies of Islam against each other, right? That's just a really bad sign of where we're at. And so I think it's important for us to say that, there are private spaces that are important that we're lacking, and there are public spaces that are important that we're lacking. The private spaces, subhanAllah, anytime you can remove any element of performance or spectatorship and just facilitate good, strong, bonding between people, spaces where people humanize one another, they get to understand the background of a person. Why are you so interested in this area? Why do you do this? And so that takes part with bringing ulama of different strands together, facilitating, conferences, not public conferences, at least not initially, but private spaces where people meet, get to talk to one another, get to develop that basis of ukhuwa with one another, just brotherhood and sisterhood.
In real life.
Yeah, you see someone in real life, and subhanAllah, it makes it a lot harder for you to trash someone online if you've dealt with them, in a brotherly way on site. You've got to know that person. So I think facilitating ukhuwa, brotherhood, because those are sacred bonds that should not be violated in any situation. And then building on that, facilitating private spaces where deep debate can happen. Yeah. Because we need deep debate about our approaches. We need to be able to see each other's blind spots and help each other out and give each other nasiha. And I think publicly, when's the last time you saw like a Twitter debate end well? It's like everyone, people throw stuff at each other and then it's just done, right? Just cut each other off. I think that one of the great harms of invalid critique, which is just mean-spirited slander, splicing pictures together and creating a false narrative, is that it really drowns out like very valid critique and very valid spaces. And I think the majority of critique is valid. Like I think the majority of criticisms that would happen are actually valid criticisms, but then they get bunched in with the noise and it immediately becomes tribal. So it's like
it's polarizing.
Yeah, it becomes very polarizing. Yeah. So I think it's important for us to try to find spaces, inshallah ta'ala, and lead the way with respectful public engagement, respectful private engagement. I don't purport to have the answers to that, because I really don't. I think online toxicity, my approach to it has been just ignore it altogether.
Follow the ignoring it, maybe it'll go away manhaj as well.
Well, actually, but I don't want it to go away, right? So
that's the irony is, if you really disagree with someone's statements, actions, and so forth, kind of attacking them personally and kind of publicly and that kind of stuff, it naturally just gets people to defend them, and that's what you don't want. Like you said, there's legitimate criticism. There's legitimate criticism about everyone, even Pir Omar Suleiman here. But,
I normally have personal conversations with them though.
I was just saying, you shouldn't let your hatred for people cause you to swerve from justice. And most of the time, it just becomes so, psychologically, most people read the headline of an op-ed and they look at the picture and then they'll press share before they
comments.
Just like how naql al-fatwa is a fatwa, to transfer a fatwa is like giving a fatwa. When you press share on something, you better know what's in there. Or and taqulu, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and tusibu qawman bi jahala fatusbihu ala ma fa'altum nadimin. Like you actually spread slander and hatred and you didn't know. It was just out of ignorance, but we become so driven to camps, right? And it's like anything that's said against that person is haqq, because that is a person of batil. Anything that's said against that person is truth, because that's a person of falsehood. And so I'm going to keep on blasting. And you take a step back and you say, you know what? I need to be able to filter that out for myself and for others as well, and not allow myself to fall victim to that binary.
Yeah.
So I had a question actually, Sheikh. So as I guess maybe you'll touch upon your journey into becoming an imam, working in the public space, okay, in a very much I guess with general society as opposed to your typical type of imam in the UK at least, who are very kind of their own community centric, brings about its own challenges and opportunities. And in today's age, which is I guess very materialistic, very kind of narcissistic, I'm talking about generally society as a whole, and this is something we as Muslims worry about as well. How did you make that call between kind of calling for a spiritual revolution, for want of a better term, in terms of focusing on the community, and this kind of wider engagement with society that will have its own challenges? So you're going into the public space, you're going to have to make some judgment calls. This is the reality of anyone who operates in the public. Yeah. So you're going to have a diplomatic form of leadership versus a patient form of silence, because we spoke about silence earlier. And between that, saying what's best for my people, am I making the right moves in these new waters? How did you navigate through that? Or how do you navigate through it still?
I think it's important for someone that represents the community to sort of stay grounded within the community. And so sometimes, like the journey of a person that becomes an activist in some capacity is that at some point, they're operating in the public space and they get tired of getting questioned from the community. So it's like, you know what, I'm done with the community. So I still have the identity of Islam and the identity of the Muslim community as I'm operating in the public space, but forget the community because it just give me a headache, right? And I think that can be really destructive to a person's soul and to a person's long-term operating. I have the blessing. I live here in Dallas with Sheikh Yasser Barjas are in the same masjid, and I know that Sheikh Yasser Barjas has never come to the UK. I don't think he's come to the UK. But really has a great. He's just a great brother, a great murabbi to the community, a great imam, to the community. Really someone that leads beautifully, mashallah. And I've enjoyed, alhamdulillah, now being at Valley Ranch Islamic Center with him for like 8 years. And Sheikh Yasser would always remind me. He would say, don't go so far and then leave the community behind. Make sure that you're, it's slower when you move with the community, but it's more meaningful when you're actually able to take the community with you to important places and sort of show them the way rather than, the individual success story, right? So how do you sort of help the community develop a methodology for engaging the public space rather than just go try to figure it out yourself? And so you're right, there are going to be judgment calls, but I think it's really important for us to stay grounded within the community and to help through mutual concern and advice, through guidance from our teachers, through communication with our colleagues, through working with one another to figure out, what's the methodology for engaging this space in a way that is going to actually advance things that are important to all of us, and it's not going to leave anyone behind. So we have to get out of the mindset of, a Muslim that went places is a success story in and of itself. I think our community has to move forward, inshallah ta'ala, in ways that we're living up to the mandate of believing in Allah and believing in the Messenger ﷺ, and enjoining good and forbidding evil and leading the way, shuhada ala nas. So I think that's an important part. I'm a volunteer at my masjid. I've been a volunteer at Valley Ranch Islamic Center. That's not the case when I was in New Orleans. My only full-time commitment is to Yaqeen Institute. Everything else I do is sort of on a irregular basis. And so, but with the masjid here, it's important to me because It allows me to stay within the community, to sort of, stay grounded within the community without feeling shackled by it, right? So I think it's, and I fall short sometimes. I'm not saying I've succeeded. There are times that you mentioned it,
the community keeps you in check.
Yeah, there are times, and people have to keep each other in check. Like we've got to be able to have people in our lives that don't agree with us. لا يرى منكم عيبا إلا عابا. Like let not one of you see a fault of mine except that they point it out. So we've got to have people that point out faults, not from a place of trying to destroy your da'wah, but trying to say, look, this would be better. Jazakallahu khairan. Let's not now. If you could do this, do that. Maybe you shouldn't have said this. Maybe you shouldn't have done that. And
otherwise, you'd be in an echo chamber.
Yeah,
which is not
very easy to develop. Just to divide the world into cheerleaders and haters.
Yeah.
And that is that you have to remove the noise, both of excessive praise and destructive criticism.
Yeah.
And find that sweet spot where you have people in your life that give you positive encouragement, right? Where they don't break your back with praise. And people that give you constructive criticism, where they don't want to destroy your da'wah, they want to see you do better with it. So,
not afraid to give you a few Hadoukens along the way as well.
No one shot a Hadouken at me in person, at least. I've never met a Ryu.
You ever sparred with your brother-in-law?
Oh man, you're bringing.
Who's his brother-in-law?
You want to know something funny about him? He will admit this. I bought him his first pair of boxing gloves when he was like 12 years old.
MashaAllah.
I actually taught him like the basics of just jab, hook, cross, uppercut. Like I taught him the basics. I do not suggest that I can beat him up now. I'm not trying it, but alhamdulillah, he's more like
lost. Who's his brother-in-law? Who's your brother-in-law? Sorry.
My brother-in-law is an MMA fighter.
MashaAllah.
Yeah. Abdul Karim As-Silwadi.
Wow.
So, I don't mess with my brother-in-law. I don't mess with my wife. I don't mess with my in-laws. I'm a very.
So he's your wife's brother rather than your sister's husband.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the worst type of brother-in-law to have as an expert.
My wife's father is one of my mashayikh.
Wow.
He was Imam in Louisiana for over 2 decades, and he was an Imam who could pick up cars. Like he's built, mashallah, so strong. Like after khutbah, he'd just go into the parking lot and he could get behind a car. And we have pictures of this. He could actually pick a car up off the ground.
American cars.
So he's got like that rock.
Those are huge.
So when you set your mahar, you didn't really have an excuse to say no, huh? Is that right?
Yeah, on a serious note, subhanAllah, I learned a lot about being an imam from my father-in-law. He was, it was pretty awesome, being able to study like Madarij al-Salikin, and then, he would slaughter an animal for Eid, and then pick up a car, and then just kind of hang out with his students and stuff. It was a beautiful experience. I didn't think I'd marry his daughter, but alhamdulillah.
Is it true the mahar was $1 million?
No. You're getting my mahar story all mixed up.
Yeah, because I don't correct it for both our listeners. No.
My mahar. So my wife tried to play a trick on me.
All right.
So I went into the nikah, thinking, look, her dad's my sheikh. This can't be bad. So we didn't even talk about mahar beforehand.
First mistake.
It was just like, I'm just gonna go into it. Can't be that bad.
Rookie mistake.
And I brought my so my dad asked me about it. I said, I don't really know, but it's okay. Whatever they ask is fine. So we get to the nikah, and the mahar was $100,000 and $1.
Wow.
Okay. So my father-in-law says, he was the one conducting the nikah. He says, and she wants it now, today, $100,000 and $1. And so I was like, I'm looking at him, and he's got that. At that point, we were like boys. He's a teacher, but he's someone that I loved and I admired. And I kind of could see that he had a little bit of a.
Yeah.
There was a joke somewhere there, and my dad's kind of looking up. And my dad's a professor, a very respectable human being. So he kind of just looks at me like, you should have talked to me first.
Wasting time in it, as we'd say.
Sister-in-law's husband it was very close to me in Arabic, adili, right? So my sister-in-law's husband. I don't know what the word for it is. Call my brother-in-law, but he was like,
we
had
have
this
something in
look on his
Urdu.
face, like, oh man, like, is this like a way that you turn someone away? Like, set the mahar too high, so you set all this up, and then you like put a mahar that's too high. So I'm like talking, I'm like 100 grand and a dollar. He's like 100 grand and a dollar. I'm like 100 grand and a dollar. So 100 grand. I said 100,001. So going back and forth, it's all on camera, never to be released online, inshallah. So I'm like 100,001. He's like 100 grand and a dollar. I'm telling you exactly what it is. So then I realized he was talking about the chocolate bar, 100 grand chocolate bar. So I said,
Okay.
okay, she will get her chocolate bar and her dollar tonight, inshallah. Her 100 grand chocolate bar and her dollar tonight, inshallah. So then
you must have had a huge smile on your
pulls out
face.
the chocolate bar from his pocket. So, and then
I've
we're
got this
laughing, and the people that were there, a lot of them still have no idea what happened. So we're laughing and celebrating, and and there's one brother who's like really upset, and he's like, what a horrible example for the community. Because at that point I just become Imam in New Orleans. He was the Imam in Baton Rouge. It was like at that, so he was like, this is a horrible example. An Imam marrying his daughter to another Imam, and their mahar is 100,000, it's 6-figure mahar, and what type of example? So we had to sit there and actually explain to the people, like, this is what happened.
Yeah.
It was 100 grand and a dollar.
It's really bad.
Had
when
a
I have to
dollar on you,
explain the
yeah?
joke.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah.
Right.
MashaAllah. So I guess one thing actually interesting, a brother was telling me that back in the day, I think that we're talking about 2010 now, he was in Fort Lauderdale, and you were invited to a masjid fundraiser there. Now, he goes that back in there, everyone, I guess you were probably less well known than you are now. And he goes, there was about 5 people there, and you just came in, and you started the fundraising at $50,000. Right, and he goes that this was quite, mashallah, like a developing community, and he goes that at that time you could see you kind of just come in, young Imam, and you started at $50,000, and like it was like no response from the community. And I think, mashallah, from there I guess you've gone on to do much bigger fundraisers. But I'm sure all these sort of interesting stories in your background. When you started off as an Imam, I guess what was your steepest learning curve? Mashallah, from the support of your father-in-law, and when you were out on your own.
Yeah, it was so much, because I inherited a post Hurricane Katrina New Orleans situation, and so it's not an exaggeration to say that I had to juggle almost on a daily basis a janaza, a nikah, a talaq, and teach Quran. Like it was all, why? Because a lot of the imams had not come back to their masajid, and so it wasn't just I had Masjid Abu Bakr, which was the biggest masjid, but then you had a lot of other masajid, the imams had not come back. And so the steepest curve, I think, was, to be honest with you, was with the counseling responsibility, because I'm not a counselor. I didn't want to be a counselor. I didn't have that background. And I had to do everything from like changing the light bulbs in the masjid to like, to janitorial stuff, to counseling stuff. And, it was hard, because I'm not very good at compartmentalizing. Like, I'm not a very good counselor, because I don't know how to compartmentalize. Like, I take things very personally, and so that's why, like, here in Dallas, like anyone, I'm like, Sheikh Yasser Burjas is your guy. That's what you go to. Like I can't. It's tough. So that was a very difficult part of it. The amount of janazas. Because I was effectively overseeing the janaz and ghusl for 8 masjids. And so the amount of janazas, and we had to do ghusl ourselves. There was no professional service to do ghusl. So it was literally, we had to do ghusl ourselves. And so doing ghusl, my first ghusl of a dead body was a man, Allah yarhamu, from Nigeria, who was a student, and he died in his apartment. He wasn't found until 8 days later. So the way that was my first ghusl of a dead body. It was a very traumatic experience, and then subhanAllah, that became what now, I'm in Dallas, where there's a large established community, and it's all handled by a cemetery service. I actually miss doing ghusl more than anything else as an imam, because it was the most humbling. It really, there is nothing. I think I wrote something about this maybe a year or two ago. there is nothing that is better for the heart and more that reminds you more of life than as you're carrying out that responsibility for your brother. You know, as you're preparing them for death. There's nothing. There's absolutely no experience that can parallel. You know, you can still go to janazas. You can go to the graveyard. You can remember death. But subhanallah, doing ghusl for the dead was an experience that I think every Muslim should strive to do that. You know, somewhat not regularly, but at least to do that, to keep their hearts connected to the reality, right? What it looks like to actually wash and prepare a lifeless body, and to remind yourself that it's going to be you. So it was a lot of things that hit all at the same time. I'm grateful to Allah for it, because I learned more in 6 years at that 6 years consecutively of being Imam there. I learned more in that 6 years than I could have ever learned, you know, studying.
Assalamu alaikum guys, me again, reminding you to head over to islam21c.com/donate to keep the lights on Islam 21c. We pride ourselves on being independent and being funded by the grassroots community. Yeah, subhanAllah. I mean, a lot of brothers who come back from studying abroad, for example, they have this shock, you know, that they've been you know, studying a lot of important sciences and stuff, but you know, when they're coming, when they're here, they're faced with, you know, a child who wants to run away from home, or you know, some broken family, or someone who needs some serious counseling and stuff, and they're kind of thrown in the deep end. Do you have something? I mean, is it part of your dawah to try and prepare younger up and coming imams and students of knowledge and stuff to help them hit the ground running in that regard? Is that what partly, you know, your focus in your dawah?
Do you have that culture, just to add to that, do you have that culture of the imams going abroad to study and coming back, or is it generally all local? Has there been a shift?
I'll try to answer both of those questions. I though I think it's very important, I don't think I do enough in that regard. So it's probably something that I'd like to do more of, inshallah ta'ala, to just help people through some of the very practical elements. There are people far senior to me in ilm that can help people with the knowledge base. But I think it's important for us, not necessarily even as mentors, but just as older brothers, to say to people that are coming back, like, look, you know, you're going to have to approach this with a level of humility and understand that the problems that you think the ummah has versus the problems the ummah actually has, there's going to be a very rude awakening, and it's going to be a lot that's going to shake you up. This is no longer debating things online. Like, this is real life now, and the majority of reasons why people flee from the deen, the majority of reasons why people have trauma in their lives is because of deeply personal things. And you're going to have to listen and sit with people's pain, and then try to be a source of rahmah to them that the Prophet ﷺ was, to where even when you say, I don't have the answer to your particular issue, but you can still demonstrate, you know, something prophetic to them, to help them know that you were there for them, right? And then that's going to change the khutbahs that you give, right? That's going to change a lot about what you talk about. So personally, I have not been involved in any formal capacity. MashaAllah, Sheikh Abdul Nasser Jangda, Mufti Kamani, they have Qalam seminary here, which is an incredible institution. Alhamdulillah, I always
they have a chapter here in the UK as well. Do they?
MashaAllah. So I mean, they're, you know, Sheikh Mikael and you know, Sayyid Abdurrahman Murphy, and now I'm afraid of missing the names, Mufti Muntasir. All of them.
Sorry for laughing. You know, when you were saying that about the rude awakening, for some reason the quote of Mike Tyson popped into my head. Everyone has a plan before they get punched in the mouth. You know? So you have all the theory and stuff, but you know, this is the Ummah needs and stuff.
It is so true. It is so true. So you start off and like, I'm going to teach a class on this, and I'm going to talk about this. And again, all of the ulum have relevance. Like, there's nothing of the Sharia that should be left out. There's value to teaching aqidah and fiqh and tafsir, and going through the, you know, Riyadh al-Salihin for the public after Salat al-Isha on a regular basis. Those sources of guidance should be undisrupted. They should be present in every masjid. Then it's like, okay, you know, how am I going to not talk about the fact that, you know, the amount of domestic violence that's happening in my community? Like, how am I not going to talk about this? Right? Like, how am I not going to talk about the issue of drugs? How am I not going to talk about pornography? How am I not going to, like, am I really just going to pretend none of these dilemmas exist in my community? And this is what's causing people deep personal trauma, and like they're having issues. or racism in the masajid.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is something we should not wait for something to happen on the outside for us to become more introspective as a community and say, all right, well, are we really implementing what the Prophet ﷺ did of treating people like full, dignified, respected human beings and brothers and sisters in Islam when they walk into our masjid doors? Or are we going to wait for something to happen on the outside and then, oh, the moment is now? No, the moment was long ago, right? So like, you have to, when you get into the grassroots, when you become an imam and when you're with the community, working with the community, you have to work with the community's issues, and you can't just talk over them anymore, or else you're going to have a serious cognitive dissonance.
Do you think we as a community have failed to make mainstream unjust issues our issues? Or do you think we just haven't had the airtime?
I would just take a step back and I say I think we failed as a community, and I include myself in the failure. I'm not saying they failed, and no, I think we failed collectively as a community of demonstrating prophetic concern for the people, right? So we should not be a people that see an opportunity to jump on an issue. We should be a people that see a prophetic priority, right? And the Prophet ﷺ was not someone that, like, I keep trying to sit with this. Like, if the Prophet ﷺ saw the George Floyd video, and I'm not one of those people, I don't like when people say, if Muhammad ﷺ was here, he would have done this, and then assign a very specific direction, I would never, I shouldn't say I would never, I hope I never do that, inshallah, because it's wrong. It's wrong to say, if the Prophet ﷺ was here, he'd be doing this, and he'd be saying this, unless we know that he already said it and did it, or it speaks to his general quality. Like, can you imagine Rahmatan lil Alameen, the one who cried at, or who demonstrated empathy for that mother bird, seeing a man with a knee on his neck slowly executed in the public space for up to 9 minutes, right, with that cruelty and that hatred, and not being like completely moved by it. So the Prophet ﷺ, who asked Allah for hubb al-masakin, for the love of the poor, who said, "Ibghuni fi al-du'afa, hal turzaquna wa tunsaruna illa bi du'afaikum," find me amongst the oppressed. So that means if we are not, as Muslims, found amongst the oppressed, then that's something that we need to deeply interrogate ourselves with as a community and as individuals. And even if that means just sadaqah, like I get that some people don't want to step into the typical framework of things, but volunteer, go out there and feed the homeless, go out there and interact with the people. And there's no way that you're not going to come away with some greater perspective on how to change systemically what is causing them to suffer in that way, whether that's our global politics with our Muslim brothers and sisters in different parts of the world that are suffering due to the war machines generated from the West, or whether that's domestically with our brothers and sisters in humanity, right, and what they're suffering from. So every Muslim should go out there. I said earlier, everyone should specialize, and I mean that. But every Muslim should have some element of their lives where they're actively engaging the fuqara and the du'afa and the masakin. Even if it's just handing out sadaqah and being there and listening to people in pain and talking to them, because that's what softens the heart. Someone complained to the Prophet ﷺ about the hardness of his heart, so he told him to caress the head of an orphan, to accompany an orphan and caress his head. So that's what softens the heart, and that's what helps us develop perspective and lenses that we can then put that in conversation with the Quran and the Sunnah, without having to have the important conversations forced upon us by what's happening outside of us. Instead, we're always searching for the important courses of action that we should be taking, right? The prophetic courses of action. We ask Allah to help us all in that.
I mean, these types of things, I suppose I'd like to hope that every Muslim, agrees with the theory. But it's kind of the difficulties when it comes into practice, and that's where you get some critics. Some are, raising maybe fair objections. Obviously, some are maybe raising unfair objections and so forth. But just to play devil's advocate here, one of the kind of objections for Muslims going into the public domain and working on and calling and cooperating with people on these issues of helping clear maslahah for everyone, helping the poor, the needy, and so on and so forth. One of the criticisms, as you probably know, is you have to end up working with people who have some maybe obviously views that you disagree with, right? I mean, the extreme example, LGBT lobby and that kind of stuff, you know. And they'll say, or, you know, the people who are trying to reform Islam and that kind of stuff based on kind of maybe white Western horizons, yeah, like liberalism and so forth. So what would you say if somebody kind of criticizes you or anyone else for that, for, you know, sharing a platform with such person, or, you know, the usual criticism? I mean, what's your view about that?
I think. Look, there are the loud. There are the very, you know, the very far criticisms that are that just accuse Muslims of you know, seriously wrong things, and then there are the fair critics. So I want to focus on fair critics, right? So
Yeah.
I think it is a very fair criticism, that when you go to a space, are you lending more credibility to that space, or are you bringing an Islamic presence to that space? And it's something that we have to juggle in our lives all the time. You know, I think that the answer to that is that we need to develop frameworks, right? So, you know, Sheikh Dawood Walid wrote the book Towards Sacred Activism. I recently actually taught a class at Qalam with the seminary students and put out the notes on towards a Sunnah framework. I think we need to build up our framework so that we're not ambiguous, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that we can. Actually, let me just put it this way: we cannot. Not I don't think, we cannot ever support anything religiously, politically, socially, culturally that is opposed to the Quran and the Sunnah. Not in the capacity of LGBT politics or in the capacity of CVE or surveillance or some of the others. We can't support any of that stuff, any element of it that opposes the Quran and the Sunnah, right? So the idea is, how do you live the Quran and the Sunnah in the public space? And if you're in a society, a pluralistic society, you're going to have to work with people who hold differing beliefs and differing viewpoints than you. So what that means is that I think that you know, it's important for us to demonstrate. And this is what I'm actually writing an article right now on interfaith versus multi-faith. We formed a coalition here in Dallas called Faith Forward Dallas, and we called it a multi-faith coalition rather than an interfaith coalition. So I'm actually writing an article for Religion News Service on the difference between multi-faith and interfaith, and you know, how we can, you know, really encourage people. Look, you know, come to the table. Be yourself, be who you are. You know, you're a Christian, you're a Jew, you're a Muslim, whoever you are. You don't have to compromise you don't have to compromise your religion. Like, we don't have to start mixing liturgies and prayers in order to be a healthy cooperation, right? So what we're looking for is that everyone has their particularities. We certainly have ours as Muslims, right? As Orthodox Muslims. So the question becomes, what's a healthy table to be at?
Yeah.
And the way that I generally try to define that is that the issues should be very specific. So we are here right now to work on police brutality. Police brutality is the issue. I'm on a task force right now, you know, that is actually you know, putting forth very specific demands to change policing in America. Whoever else is at that table for that issue, I'm not carrying the baggage of everything else they carry, because right now this is the issue. And so I think it's important for us to work on issues and be very specific to the issues that we're working on. That doesn't mean seeking problematic alliances. That means that there are inevitably going to be times that if you're going to be effective in society and work on these specific issues, whether it's homelessness or poverty or policing or racism or healthcare, whatever it is, right? That there are inevitably going to be people at the table that are not going to agree with you on a lot, and you're not going to agree with them on a lot. So what's important for us is stick to the issues, be unambiguous about where we stand on our own identity, and you know, not to carry out or not to carry on the baggage of everyone else, and then to find that place of harmony and coexistence that's important, inshallah ta'ala, for us all as we're living in these societies. So we should create frameworks, and I think that's what's going to help us navigate through. And that's what we need, you know, people who love their deen and who also want to see a place for their deen working together to try to figure out, you know, how do we navigate these very, very gray areas where we're inevitably going to make mistakes. How do we navigate the gray areas with a sense of love and mutual concern with one another? I want my brother or my sister that's passionate about this issue to succeed and not to fall to the pitfalls what so many Muslim activists have fallen to, where they ended up championing issues that are not okay for us to champion. Yeah. I don't want my Muslim brother or sister that's kind of on the edge to feel like, well, this is the only way to be effective right now in the public square. Yeah. No, we pull you back and let's say, okay, you can be Orthodox, an Orthodox Muslim, a Muslim who abides by the Quran and the Sunnah in the fullest sense, and not have to fall to those pitfalls. You don't have to go that far. You can stay here. You can craft a meaningful space for yourself. And we wouldn't be the first community to do that. There are other religious communities that have crafted a very meaningful space for themselves, that they have not fallen to the left or the right schism, right? They are who they are. And as Muslims, we should be leading the way, inshallah ta'ala, of not being, uncritically, Republicans or Democrats, left or right. But instead, just living Islam, right, in the fullest sense, and having an authority when we speak on issues because we're present on the issues that are of importance to society.
Assalamu alaikum, guys. Last reminder, I promise. Head over to islam21c.com/donate to help this movement get to the next level. So we have genuine, high-quality media articulating Islam in the 21st century and developing confident Muslims impacting the world for the better.
Yes, of course.
You have credibility with people then. And that's one of the problems of polarizing, because somebody who is teetering on the edge, who maybe they have that zeal and that eagerness to be active and make some positive change. If they perceive there to be a polarization, and that could push them even further into the hands of those who do genuinely want to deform and change Islam, for example, using activism and so forth. I mean,
people are sincere.
Yeah, I mean
most people are sincere in what they want to do, and so most people, both the critics of activism and most people that engage in activism, like there's a sincere concern. And once you start casting, you say this person is trying to change the deen, or this person's just, hey, let's just pull it. And that's the point of the in-person, let's just pull everyone in a room if we can, and just be like, hey, what is it you're trying to achieve? You don't have to go that far. Let's talk this out like brothers and sisters. And we don't have those spaces, which is why I think sometimes it devolves into toxic online discourse.
I mean, what you said about sticking to specific issues, it kind of echoes the Quranic methodology as well. وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. That cooperate on al-birr and taqwa. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the deciding factor on the actual thing that you're cooperating about, not with whom you're cooperating.
Yeah, and I think that's what Hilf al-Fudul is about. And I'll play my own critic here. A healthy critic will say how much of it, though, is on paper about the issue and how much of it is dominated by other partners and the baggage that they bring. And so that's where the judgment call comes in, right? So if I'm going to work on this issue and I believe that this issue is important for us to be present on, and there are people that are there at the table who inevitably I don't agree with on everything, but sometimes there are 20 partners on paper. There's really only one person that's driving, one organization that's driving.
Could be just a tokenistic.
So we have to, I think that's where the judgment call comes in. I think that's where, healthy debate comes in, amongst us as Muslims. Like, how do we do this without, the ACLU is an example, for here, that was really championing the call against the Muslim ban in the United States, right?
ACLU stands for, sorry?
The American Civil Liberties Union.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm forgetting I'm the British audience. So, I mean, think of a legal organization, right, that is fighting on behalf of, and I might have actually messed up the acronym because I always say ACLU. I might have messed up the name. But anyway, think of a legal organization that's fighting on the rights of Muslims, for the rights of Muslims on an issue. But then on another issue, you might actually find yourself opposed to them as a community. Right? Does that mean I'm going to shut the ACLU out when they come to be a healthy partner on this issue, or am I going to maintain sort of a neutrality and integrity where, okay, well, this is something we can work together on, but there are other things that, look, we're going to be on opposing ends here.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because as Muslims, we cannot become tribal, and we can't fall to the polarization of society and become, one party or one ideological trend and always associated with that. Like, we've got to have that balance and that integrity about us, to where we speak to issues and we speak on principle, and we then form partnerships around those issues of principle, because there is,
that's ultimately more just.
Or to one extreme or the other. That is a legitimate fear, and we've got to be careful, inshallah ta'ala.
In practical terms, though, Sheikh, sorry to interrupt you. In practical terms, I guess, with the leadership, the current US leadership, are you finding that those alliances are almost automatically being made for you, just by fact that the government's quite right wing in its sense? I can imagine before you could get involved in without being obviously political, whereas now any stance you take is automatically going to be seen almost as a political stance as well.
Or in other words, would you work with Republicans on a particular issue, or would you just always be?
Yeah, so both of those points are very important, and they do tie together. I think it's easier for Muslims to, in a place of fear. So I actually wrote this article for Huffington Post. It's called "Muslims and the Left: Can Social Conservatives Be Involved in Social Justice?" A few years ago, when I was kind of seeing the trend of Trump in America, right, where it feels like Muslims are uncritically embracing the left, uncritically embracing the democratic platform, which I think is deeply problematic, right? Just to say, all right, well, these people hate our guts, so we're gonna just jump. Like, we've got to. I think that we have to maintain, and there are going to be some people, and this goes back to the point of specializing, all right? There are going to be some people that are going to work center left, and some people that are going to work center right. So you're going to have those Muslims that were traditionally Republicans, and the Republican Party has gone far right fascist, that will kind of work with reasonable Republicans that they're not as many these days, but reasonable Republicans that don't represent what the Republican Party is really devolving into. And there are going to be Muslims that are going to kind of work center left, right? And on some issues, I'll be very honest with you, like when I'm working on anti-militarism, most of the people that will work in anti-militarism spaces, especially those that persisted in those spaces in the Obama era, because under Obama, a lot of people didn't want to criticize the U.S. militarism anymore. So he could drop drones because he was still cool. Yeah, and I was like, no, he's great. America's
26,000 bombs dropped in this final year or something.
He's droning Somalia. He's still rounding up immigrants. ICE was terrible under Obama's era. And so most of the people that would still work in the spaces of anti-militarism were far left of. So like on those issues, fine. Then on issues, for example, religious freedom and what religious freedom actually is going to mean for Muslims and institutions. A lot of what you all went through in the UK. And I actually praised, and I think that the letter, for example, that the Imams wrote that's published on Islam 21C is a great example of like how to articulate your position as a community on issues while not departing from your principles, right? And so I think that sometimes it's going to mean that, look, we're going to have to sit in the room and say, okay, how do we protect ourselves as religious institutions, and not fall prey? We're not white supremacists trying to take over society or use issues like wedge issues. Like Orthodox Jews and AME, the African Methodist Episcopal African American church here in the United States, which is the church of civil rights and Rosa Parks, and the church that was actually shot up in a few years ago in South Carolina. They're a conservative church. They're socially conservative. So like, how are those communities going to work together and say, look, we have to draw a line, where our institutions can still function properly. And when you have Democrats that are threatening 501c3 status for religious institutions because they have traditional views of marriage or whatever it may be, that's dangerous. Like, you're crossing a line. So that's why I think Muslims stay principled. We should work on issues. We should not be tokenized. We should not uncritically use any particular platform or party. And we should always lead the way, I think, in terms of civil discourse. Like, okay, like we disagree with you on this, but we're not going to be toxic. We're not going to, we're not going to be toxic. And the last thing on the Republicans, the Uyghurs. Look, Uyghur issue, and that's an issue that Allah blessed me to be able to work with on some things. Like, you know what, there were a lot of Republicans that worked on the Uyghur issue. Yeah, they wanted to take shots at China, but you know what, fine. If that's your motivation, fine. Are you going to help me work with the Uyghur? Are you going to work with the Uyghur community and the people that are raising the cause of religious freedom for the Uyghurs? Because if you're just going to talk about religious freedom as in your evangelical churches here and Christian persecution, and you're going to ignore the biggest violation of religious freedom in the world right now, then you're being deeply critical. So that's where we work with, Republicans and conservatives as well.
I think that's key, I mean, and the joint statement, the LGBT one, that was motivated by something that I'm always getting annoyed at, and that is when Muslims wander into debates amongst kind of rival non-Muslim factions and take sides, rather than carving out and laying out our own stall, so to speak, and saying, look, this is us, we want to do our own politics, we're going to talk about issues, anyone who agrees with us on this issue will work with anyone who agrees with us on this issue will work with everyone. And it's really disempowering when Muslims have to, and a lot of us, we do this kind of unconsciously, and that is where we've been taught to express our concerns through the language of a pre-existing dichotomy, or either left or right, or authoritarianism, libertarianism, or whatever is the case. And this is something that we're trying to sometimes see. We try and push that, try and articulate your own position, your own values, your own narratives, be your own, the kind of cliche now, what we're always talking about, be authors of your own narratives rather than characters in someone else's story, And,
that's the answer to the community. Maybe going too far left on issues is not a right-wing Muslim response. The answer is Islam. The answer is Islam from our community, developing our own frameworks. And that's going to take some internal debate. That's also going to take intelligence, for us to be strategic, to be to put aside our egos, to be willing. Because when you craft something that's balanced, no one's going to like it. You're going to get beat up by people that are going to say you're too soft, too hard. This is too far this way, too far that way. It's just a natural. I think you're going to have critics on all sides, and I'm sure that letter that got published on Islam 21C, I'm sure some people thought it was too soft. I'm 100% sure that was probably a criticism that you all received. And I was watching, Imam Ajmal, is it Mansour or Masur?
Masroor, yeah.
Who in his interviews, I'm sure some people throwing, you messed up here, you messed up there. The reality is that difficult situations are going to require us to really try to find our voice, and our voice cannot become the voice of fascists and white nationalists that hate our guts, and then using that language. No, that's not us. That's not us. But we're also a religious community, and the left is becoming increasingly hostile. And I hear this from the religious left. I hear this from religious moderates that are really passionate about certain issues, where they feel that sometimes there's a hostility to religion in some of those spaces that's unacceptable.
Yeah.
And so Muslims should craft their own language, their own frameworks. And that means that when we speak, our epistemology, our issues, our language, it has to be the Sunnah. And that's why I did the course on the 40 hadith on social justice. It was an attempt. How do we start to articulate frameworks on justice? And inshallah ta'ala, I'm finishing up the book right now called 40 on Justice. So that's not a shameless plug, but it's actually it is pretty. Maybe it is a shameless plug, but inshallah, that's something that,
as long as we get a few free copies, inshallah,
on justice, putting it together, inshallah, so we can have our own frameworks on these things. Inshallah.
I agree with everything you said, Swana, about that. I mean, I know you have to go soon because you have a big important meeting probably with some task force somewhere. But I want to just quickly at the end just ask you about what's the next steps now for you, for Yaqeen Institute. for Islamic research. If you could just give us a few,
And also
what's your
post-COVID,
video?
if you can, wrap it in as well, so we save time. Wrap in the post-COVID world.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah, post-COVID changed a lot for everybody, right? And so with Yaqeen, there was just an intense pressure suddenly to really step up on content production. So alhamdulillah, with Yaqeen, we formed as a think tank, as a non-profit 501c3 think tank, where everything we do is free and we try to reach as many places as possible. And that was because we recognize that Islamophobic think tanks are well-funded and they don't have any subscription models. They're just trying to get as high as they can on Google and penetrate as many spaces, mainstream or otherwise, as possible. And so we wanted to bring Islam to forward in that regard. So alhamdulillah, we have a staff of over 40 now.
MashaAllah.
So what it looks like is we're continuing to develop research, take the research, package it in with the creative team, turn it into infographics and short videos and animations. Marketing team, marketing here means that they just make sure that reaches the places that it needs to reach in terms of media, in terms of Muslim spaces. We have an engineering team that makes apps and things of that sort. We have a curriculum team that is packaging all of that for all of the different institutions in the community for free. Islamic schools, MSA, ISOCs, YM, Young Muslims, Mass Youth, all these different groups, Masajid. And we have, and I always forget some teams, so I'm going to try not to this time, but we have a partnership team which holds hands with institutions to make sure that they're able, inshallah ta'ala, to make the use of that. And then finally, the development team, which is the fundraising wing of Yaqeen. So alhamdulillah, we've grown. And our goal now, inshallah ta'ala, is to continue to produce more meat. No, don't do that.
Now your PhD is making sense.
Yeah.
You're giving someone a clip that going to end up somewhere. No. Our goal, inshallah ta'ala, is to inspire the world, not take over the world, inspire the world with the beauty of Islam.
Okay.
Distribution of Islam.
Okay, wink, wink, yeah. Inspire the world.
Wide open, no winking.
You can wink with your eyes open, that's amazing, Sheikh. You should see that earlier. No, alhamdulillah.
May Allah give you more tawfiq.
I mean, Allah give you tawfiq, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Allow us to work together again in the future, inshallah. Just a quick question at the end. I heard along the grapevine, I don't know if this is a true narration, but I heard that Jonathan Brown can do more press-ups than you, push-ups, and is generating better fitness. I don't know if that's...
That's not true at all, sorry. Yeah. Dr. Brown. So Dr. Brown, you mentioned my brother-in-law, who's an MMA fighter. Dr. Brown challenged him to a push-up competition. It didn't go well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I can definitely do more push-ups than Dr. Brown.
Yeah. I think we might have to have a head-to-head at some point.
If you did it with his books on your back versus him doing it with your books on his back, who would do more?
Yeah, even more. That's true.
MashaAllah. Allah bless you.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. I know you need to head off now, so I'll let you go, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan for attending. And anyone watching at home, Jazakallah khairan to you as well. Thank you for watching. If you like this podcast, give it a like and a share. Get involved in the comments. Let us know what you think. Just a reminder where you can get these podcasts wherever you get podcasts from: Apple, Google, Spotify, Castbox, all the rest of that good stuff. And stay tuned to Yaqeen, stay tuned to Unscripted, and we'll see you next time. Final words, Omar.
Look out
Omar
for
Suleiman.
That's right. Look out for Sheikh Omar Suleiman's book, 40 Hadith on Injustice. Inshallah, we look forward to. There's a plug earlier.
40 on justice.
On justice, yeah. Against injustice.
Yeah. And the whole 2022 takeover plan. That's still in the pipeline.
That's right. And please don't be disappointed if you meet me instead of the real Sheikh Omar Suleiman. I apologize for that. Jazakumullah khair to everyone. Jazakumullah khair, Sheikh Omar Suleiman. Allah bless you in all the great work that you're doing and allow us all to benefit from you and your team for many years to come, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan. I appreciate it. Allah barak fikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Unscripted Live.